welcome to, I guess, what will be the first of our Vinci Cyber Seminars for 2017. I apologize for the extra noise that you might, somebody speaking here. I'm sharing the room with somebody else here, and he's going to be off his call real quick. So in the meantime, I'll try to speak as loud as I can to make sure everybody can hear me. So let's go ahead and get started. Our today's topic is what Vinci users need to know. And normally it's Tim Troutman that does these cyber seminars, general cyber seminars for Vinci for us, but he's on vacation this week, so I'm sort of subbing for him. Let's get started. All right, the agenda today, we'll begin by doing a quick overview of Vinci and what Vinci is and what it offers, and then from there we'll transition into a set of various issues that we've seen over time, questions from our users or pitfalls, sort of help desk tickets or tips for new users, and some of the questions that come to our various staff from users that indicates possible misunderstanding of some of the features or services in Vinci. So we'll try to cover as many of those as we can today to help you hopefully get a better understanding of how to take advantage of everything that Vinci offers. So Vinci is an HSR&D resource center primarily set up as a project to serve VA's research community. We do at the same time host a number of operations projects who want to take advantage of some of the features that Vinci offers. But Vinci is under OINT and the BISL team, the CW team. So as I mentioned, Vinci is primarily for research. It is not for active patient care. So if you're planning on doing some work that directly relates to active patient care, that is not where you want to be. So Vinci started some 8 or 9 years ago, and it has seen tremendous growth over time. As with some of the other successful IT projects in the VA, we started with only serving a handful of projects 8 years ago, and now we've grown to this past year. We had well over 400 new projects that were served by Vinci, and overall close to 1,000 projects new and old that Vinci served data to, and then we're hosting well over 2,000 projects now in Vinci and thousands of users. So the environment keeps growing. Of course, as with many other IT projects, the budget doesn't really always keep up with the demand, but we are finding different ways to operate more efficiently and still are managing to provide a good quality service to our users. So some of the things that Vinci offers, we do have a website known as Vinci Central that offers a lot of features, and I'll cover some of those. We do have the Vinci Workspace, which essentially is a cloud-like environment where you go in and are able to do all your research work and data analysis work. In that environment, we offer a number of different applications that you can use to do your work and access data and work with your data. And along with that, for the data, Vinci offers the most comprehensive data sets available in the VA, a collection of all the various data sets that are commonly requested and used by VA researchers. And along with that, we offer services on top of all that whole environment and the data to enable users to take advantage of the data and perform the work they need to do. Talking a little bit more about the Vinci services, one of the services that Vinci offers is the Vinci Concierge service. That includes education and training of the users. We do data needs assessment to help you evaluate the feasibility of a project that you're considering, or to get some preliminary data to get you started with your project, patient counts, and so forth. The overall mission of the services team and the concierge teams is to help researchers get started, get management data, get timely answers to the common questions that they may have. We have online services. We also have staff that answer calls, a live help desk, and also staff that, if you have a need to speak to someone one-on-one, can contact you and guide you through the various processes that you may have questions on. Some of the other services that Vinci provides, of course, the data provisioning being at the top of that. As I mentioned, hundreds of new projects each year, and hundreds more that are being served data to every year, new and old projects. So data services providing data and provisioning data for research projects is one of the main services that Vinci provides. In addition to that, a lot of various types of technical support to help you take advantage of the environment, use the resources available in Vinci. I briefly mentioned the study Feasibility Assessment. So if you have a research idea in mind and you'd like to evaluate its feasibility before you get started with the IRB process and so forth, you come to Vinci, and we have staff here to help you look at the numbers, look at the counts, to make sure that you have the data sets that you would need to perform your project. Clinical trial recruitment is another service that Vinci provides. These are projects where they may need to work with a set of patients, possibly send out questionnaires or surveys, and they may need a patient list and patient addresses. So we do provide that service if you come in with your requirements. We'll use those requirements environments, come up with a cohort set, and provide you with the names, addresses, and so forth to enable you to continue with your project. Annotation and chart review. There's a dedicated team that works on providing those services to research users. Natural language processing. Again, there's a team that provides NLP support. If you have a need to study and mine data from text information, clinical notes, and so forth, we have a team that provides that service and can work with you to basically look at the data and extract concepts from notes. And then on top of that, we have the analytics and data services staff in the Sas team and other areas that can work with you to help you take advantage of some of the applications and analytical tools available in Vinci.
So my workspace is kind of
looking at the Vinci Central, that's the primary website for Vinci, and it has a lot of various features. One of the more useful features in Vinci Central is the site, the page that we call My Vinci Dashboard. And so if you have a project in Vinci and you'd like to be able to take a look at all the different features and files, databases, so on that you have available to you in Vinci and you're working with, and you want to go to a single place and be able to get a listing of all that and be able to see information about all the different projects that you may have in Vinci. This is the page to go to. You'll be able to see a listing of all your databases, database size, same with the file shares. If you have VMs or if you have a collaboration site, you'll be able to look at all your active and past Dart requests. If you have made any online requests to Vinci for services or new features, you'd be able to see a history of those and a status of where that request is, and be able to also make new requests if you have a need to online. You'd be able to see all your projects, you'd be able to see all the active directory groups that you are a member of, which essentially translates into all the various permissions that you have to different projects and data. That would be a good page to remember Vinci Dashboard if you want all that information.
Now I could go
some more information about the Vinci Central. There are a lot of helpful information if you need step-by-step procedures for how to go about get your IRB research study started, or if you have a direct research study that you want to start working on and you want to know how to go about that. There are documents there that can help you get started. We also have a number of very useful user guides to help you get started with the various areas, data access, SAS, and so forth in Vinci, and help you basically get a head start into those various areas in Vinci and be able to get a better understanding of where to go, how to get started. We also have a number of videos, helpful videos, and an archive of all the presentations that we've done over time, and links to other sites for various guides to help you get started. I talked about the Vinci Workspace. It's essentially a cloud-like environment, basically a remote environment that you log into and take advantage of all the different features in Vinci, all the different services and applications. There are a number of different ways you can take advantage of that environment. We have the standard workspace and also the development workspace. The standard workspace being a shared environment where you'd be able to access a number of different applications, at the same time have access to all the data that's been made available to you in Vinci, and file shares and data that you've stored in Vinci, and be able to work with all of that. And then we have the development workspace, which is sort of a dedicated environment that gets configured for your use or as a shared environment with your other project team members. And these development workspaces are primarily intended for those users who want to go in and do some custom development work, or they may have applications that they want to bring in and use in Vinci that are not already part of the standard workspace environment. So you can make a special request for those development environments, and those would get configured for your use. The standard workspace, there are a number of different ways to get into that. One of the primary ways is going through the website, basically that makes all the remote applications available to you, and that should always be your first choice of using an application. In that mode, when you start an application, it starts as a remote app, but it looks exactly as if the application was running on your desktop, except it's running remotely in the Vinci environment, so it's contained within its own window and appears as just any other local application. So in that mode, you would normally get the best performance because you're only going through one level of remote desktop session. We also offer the full standard workspace, which is basically logging into a desktop, and from there you'd be able to launch various applications, which again run as a remote application within that standard workspace desktop environment. So in that mode, you'd be going through two levels of remote desktop, which still performs well, but depending on the type of connection that you have and the network latencies that you may be experiencing based on your location and other factors, you may see a bit of a delay in basically when you move your mouse around or your keyboard. But I will talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of each of those a little bit later. So those are a couple of different modes, and then for the standard workspace desktop, we also offer the multi-monitor mode, which allows you to take advantage of if you have more than one monitor and you want to spread out your workspace and be able to access multiple applications and then work with those simultaneously. You'll be able to take advantage of that. More issues about the workspace, the file storage. We do have the O and P drives that we have over the past year. We've done a lot of work in trying to make that the file share environment more efficient, using a redundant cluster and much better distributed file system. So all those factors have contributed greatly to the performance level of performance that we're able to offer from the file shares. Much better, basically speed and faster access of accessing the files and writing files and so forth. So if you're a research project user, you would see your projects under your P folder, P drive as you work in the Vinci environment. For operations users, you would see your project under the O drive. And if you're like some of the users that we have in Vinci involved in both operations and projects, you'd be able to see both of those project folders or as many of the project folders as you're a part of at the same time and be able to work with those. Databases is where you normally store your data.
And
you are the data that if you are a research user and request data through the DART process, that's where your data is going to be provisioned for you. And that databases are on the various SQL Server databases that Vinci has. So that's a general distinction to be made here between the file shares and databases, and some users get those two mixed up. And they may start with their P drive and their project folder, and they come back and ask, where's my data? And so just for those of you who are not familiar with Vinci, that keeping in mind that the database is where you want to go to see your data. Along with that, you also get an H drive. Each user gets an H drive, and that's basically your personal drive. You can store, it's a bit smaller in size than the project folder, so you normally don't want to store any data in your H drive, but if you have code or other types of files that you want to store, documents and so forth,
where you want to go
place to store that type of data.
Within your organization.
I talked about the various ways getting into Vinci, the Standard Workspace, Development Workspace, and over time, in the last couple of months, we have upgraded many of those environments, and now using new servers and more servers to be able to serve those environments. So if you do have some links from the past that you bookmarked and now you're not able to open those, just keep in mind that the best place to go back to is the Vinci Central and get started with the Launch Workspace link on the homepage, and that will provide you with the correct and updated links to get into the Vinci environment.
We can also use some public services like
some other considerations and common issues that we see from the users, as many of you are accustomed to now to work with the VA environment. You have to, especially if you're working remote, you'll be coming in through CAG or the Citrix Access Gateway or the VPN environment. So a common misconception is from a lot of the users, they connect through CAG or VPN, and at that point they start wondering, well, where's Vinci? How come I'm not logged into Vinci? So just keep in mind that connecting through CAG or VPN, that just gets you connected to the VA network. From there, you still need to go through the Vinci central page using the links to get into the workspace, and then at that point you'll be connected to the Vinci environment, and now you're inside the Vinci environment. So sort of a two-step process that you have to go through. And the other issue here to mention is that a lot of times CAG and VPN users may be experiencing issues through those environments, and they end up calling Vinci, and basically that's for those issues you'd have to go through the VA help desk and report those problems to be able to get assistance with those issues. Another issue to keep in mind is Vinci is a secure environment. There's no internet connectivity inside Vinci, so that provides additional security. At the same time, it causes some limitations that you need to be aware of and be prepared to work around. So if you have a need to access the internet outside sites and bring in information or look up information that you want to use in Vinci, you want to basically have your browser running side by side with your Vinci Workspace application. And if you need to basically copy and paste between the two environments, you
repository. All those sort of information.
Basically put that information in a file, upload it quickly. I'll mention the upload download here in a minute. So just be aware of that fact, and if you have any questions as far as how to get around some of the limitations,
the day of the week and the time of the day
that causes, feel free to contact us. Or as I mentioned before, look at some of the guides on the Vinci Central site. We'll provide you a lot of helpful information to work around those. Copy and paste is, as I mentioned, doesn't exist. And
so connecting to these third-party
we do offer the upload download
applications is really
applications that are very easy to use, browser-based applications.
Reports and dashboards that help you get insights
which
on
help
your
you
data
upload
really
small
quickly.
pieces of code or whatever you have very quickly and efficiently into the environment. One of the other things that we see from our users often is when they open a Windows Explorer and you're accustomed to double-clicking on a file, and because of the file association, it opens the proper application. That's something that doesn't work as well in the Vinci environment. So you basically have to open the application and then access the file because of all the applications being remote and maybe running on different servers. And I mentioned that Vinci Workspace is the firewalled environment, and the upload download tools. Those are going to be your best friends if you have a need to transfer code or small files back and forth, and just keep in mind that the download tool is audited. We keep a copy of all the files that you download and audit those to make sure that basically patient data is not improperly downloaded. So just keep that in mind as well. I mentioned the fact that you can log into the Vinci Workspace desktop environment and then from there start another remote application. One of the common pitfalls here for users is when they start a second RDP session inside the first one, what happens is basically the connection bar or the remote desktop connection indicator at the top of the screen, they get overlaid on top of each other. So when you close one, the second window that you're in basically closes the first one, or vice versa, or if you minimize one. So to get around that issue, just click on that basically the top bar and move it one way or another a little bit, and that would expose the other session that you're in, the bar for the other session that you're in, and then you'd be able to manage those separately. Some of the other considerations as far as logging off from these remote sessions, you want to make sure that you do log off if that's what you intend to do, or exit the application rather than just clicking on the X on the upper right corner of each of the windows. That basically closes a session, but it doesn't disconnect you, so your session's still there. So realizing what you want to do, whether you want to just close your window or minimize your window, or you want to log off, you want to use the proper option. Vinci offers a very thriving Linux environment with lots of different options and applications, and basically ability to connect back to the Windows environment and use your file shares or access databases. So if you do have a need to
across the whole
work
of
in
the
the Linux
Power BI
environment,
service.
that is
I started in
offered.
the Power BI desktop, connecting to a simple Excel file.
And the Linux environment is now PID compliant, so you'll be able to basically, without using a login and password, just use your PIF card to be able to authenticate
we saw how you can
access
use Power BI to create dashboards to help track those
desktop
things over time.
That's
and how you can
keep in
connect
mind,
to
and all the
software as a
features
service
that
applications,
the Linux
things like
environment
GitHub,
offers, plus all the
to bring in data from there as well.
applications.
We also saw how you can use natural language to ask
I mentioned
questions of the data
the
once
web
it's in
page
the
that where you
Power
can
BI
go and
service.
access all the different applications as remote apps. This is that page, and you can see a complete list of all the different applications that are offered in the standard workspace that you can take advantage of. One thing to keep in mind is on the SPSS, due to funding issues, at this point Vinci is unable to upgrade SPSS. So if you are an SPSS user, you should consider possibly, if you can, migrating your work to one of the other analytics tools available. And our SAS team is well versed in SAS as well as SPSS, so they'd be able to help you with that transition if needed. We will be in the next few weeks. What we'll do a cyber seminar on basically helping users transition from SPSS to SAS. For those of you who are interested, and Vivo is another application that at this point is being considered to be phased out. It's not funded to be renewed. So if you're basically same goes for NVivo users if for transitioning to another alternative. And at the same time, both of those tools are still available in the Vinci Workspace, but they are aging and they're not being updated. So just keep that in mind, that if you are using those tools, at this point it's unknown how long they will be around. Plans are to keep them around as long as the VA standards and guidelines allow us to do that. So just keep those facts in mind. Moving on to SAS and some of the considerations there. SAS continues to be our largest and most popular analytics tool in Vinci, and we have a lot of guides. We do offer the SAS basically desktop environment as well as the Sas Grid. So take a look at all the documents that we have on the Vinci Central to get you started. Additional considerations on SAS. One of the things is when you get into the standard workspace, you want to go to the remote apps folder to get the SAS application started. Also, I mentioned Sas Grid. There are a lot of advantages in using the Sas Grid environment over the standard desktop SAS. Much more robust and much better performance. You're able to access more. You'd be made available more storage capacity if you need.
In this
and
lab,
again, if
I'll
you
start by an
use
introduction to the Power BI desktop.
many of the other
one of the,
SAS features,
tools that
SAS
you can
modules,
use
just keep in mind
to
that
connect to data,
they are
model
limited
and
on the
visualize
desktop
it in
version, but
different ways.
much more available.
I'll
in
focus
SAS
on
Grid
the data
environment.
transformation
And
capabilities.
more
of the
flexibility,
Power
more
BI
security
desktop.
overall in the SAS Grid environment as opposed to the desktop. But both of those options are available in Vinci. Sas Enterprise Minor, for those of you who are SAS users, and it offers a lot of great capabilities and relatively easy programming environment. With some of the new features in SAS, you're able to easily include R and R scripts in SAS. So take a look at those features, and as I mentioned, our SAS team is always available to answer your questions and help you get started with Sas Grid environment. SAS Enterprise Guide, again, it's a GUI interface to SAS. Makes it much easier to work with SAS, more wizard-driven and easier to use. So check out our SAS Enterprise Guide if you haven't already. Other SAS considerations, I talked about the transition from SPSS to SAS. We do offer that as a service now to help you transition from SPSS to SAS. One of the other common issues that we see with the SAS environment, as I mentioned, with the SAS desktop runs on a Windows platform, where Sas Grid runs on a Linux environment. But these are the connectivity between these environments are all very seamless. You'd be able to access your file shares, SQL Server databases from all those environments. But where you might be storing your data in your file share or your Linux environment. So just keep in mind where you're storing your data, so you can go back to the proper place to find what you're looking for. Again, the SAS team is available to help you optimize your queries and take advantage of the Sas Grid. So if you are planning to use SAS and be a long-term SAS user in Vinci, we do recommend taking a good look at the Sas Grid environment and taking advantage of many of the many features that it provides. Moving on to the data and data provisioning area in Vinci, some of the common issues that we see for some of the users who are not accustomed to working with large data sets, they may come in and they request data through Dart and come in and expect that data to be delivered to them in an Excel spreadsheet. Of course, as we're seeing with many of the projects that we serve data to, the data sets are far too large to fit into an Excel spreadsheet. And even if you were able to put all that data in an Excel spreadsheet, you won't be able to work with that data. So just keep in mind that you are working in a SQL Server environment most of the time when you're working with data, and be prepared to access your data in SQL as opposed to a small file like Excel. Vinci is basically when it comes to data, we serve data, we host the data, but we're not the creators of the data or the data stewards, so to speak. So if you do have specific issues, you will, as far as access or quality of data and so forth, we still have to refer you to the source of the data. And I also have a list of some of the data sets that we offer in Vinci, of course, all the CDW data, plus basically the SAS data sets that many research users are accustomed to using, all of those in SQL Server environment, making it easier for you to combine all those data sets and take advantage of them. Other considerations when it comes to working with data is our data team is basically with a number of projects that we have, our services are limited to data provisioning. We do try to help you, give you pointers when it comes to data analysis, but just keep in mind that you do need to have staff, analysts, data analysts on your team to be able to work with the data. Vinci offers data analysis services through the Vinci services team if you're interested in that. That is a sort of a paid service, so just keep that in mind, but that is available for those of you who don't have access to data analysts to work with you and your team. Other factors here to keep in mind is basically the data sets. As I mentioned, the data sets are very large. You're not working with small tables. Often you're working with fact tables that are millions of rows in size. So if you're accustomed to working with small data sets and have queries that used to work with these smaller data sets, and now you're having a hard time making those work with these larger data sets, just keep in mind that you want to make sure you review your queries properly, check the execution plan, take advantage of the indexes that are available, and all the different factors to basically refine and optimize your queries before you run them against these larger data sets. Keeping in mind that if you are running queries that are inefficient, you're impacting other users, since you're working in a shared environment. Some of the other common questions that we see from users, a lot of times users store data in their databases and start running out of space. One of the first things that we recommend is compressing your tables. That not only saves a lot of space, but also improves the efficiency of your queries and the access of the data. ICD-9 and ICD-10 transition from ICD-9 to 10 over the past couple of years has been an issue for a lot of the research users. Just keep in mind there's no direct translation between ICD-9 and 10, and then some of the other mix-ups that we often see are users sometimes get CPT codes, procedure codes mixed up with ICD codes. So study those different codes and be able to position yourself to be able to take advantage of what they are and what they mean when it comes to using those different codes in respect with the data that you're provided. A couple of quick Dart considerations. So basically Vinci is not the entity that approves data access. You have to go through Dart. We do offer a lot of guides, and basically our help desk also can answer questions that you would have when you start going through the Dart process, so take advantage of that. Some of the common things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to Dart and amending your Dart request. If you're adding new participants, or if you have team members that leave the project or the VA, you want to amend your Dart request to be able to make those changes. If you're asking for new data sets, or you want to move data to outside of Vinci, so those are occasions when you want to go to Dart and make those amendments and be able to get proper approval for those changes on your project. Other quick considerations as far as Vinci projects, there are the different types of projects that we serve in Vinci. Your project can entirely live in Vinci, your data, all your files and everything. Or if you have a need to download data, again, you can go through the Dart process and select the proper type of project, and that would allow you to download data if you have a need to host the data in your local data center and local servers and take advantage of specific applications, you may have a need to do that. So just going through the proper process. And always keep in mind it's always better to work with the data, much more efficient to work with the data in the Vinci environment as opposed to downloading data that would basically help you get around the issue of downloading large amounts of data and impacting the network bandwidth that's shared with all the other users. The communication with your assigned data manager always goes through the correspondence site, which is a SharePoint site. It helps us keep track of everything. So if for all your data needs, please go through the correspondence site rather than emailing the help desk or just trying to email the data manager directly. This helps us, like I said, track all the requests and communication. A couple of last quick considerations when it comes to responsibility as far as in terms of what you can and can't do in regards to a research project. Keep in mind that the primary investigator is always responsible for how the research project is conducted and making sure that the policies and guidelines are followed. One of the other requests, I guess, that we have for you is if you do use the Vinci environment and you publish a paper, please consider giving Vinci a citation in your publication, and the information is provided here. So we do ask you to do that to help basically make sure that the research community knows that Vinci provides all these different great services that enables you to conduct and complete your research projects. So that is the last of my slides. So now we have a little bit of time for questions and answers. One of the things I should mention here that if for any of the questions that we're not able to answer or don't have time for today, or if other questions that you may have later on, please feel free to email vinci@va.gov, and that gets routed to the proper individual in the Vinci team, and we'll get back to you ASAP with answers and help you through your issues. Another quick reminder is, in addition to these cyber seminars that we often do, Vinci also has a Vinci dedicated call each month. It's known as the Vinci Happy Hour. It's on the third Wednesday of each month at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. So we have one of those next week, and the format of those is usually we do have a short presentation up to half an hour to help you get familiar with one of the specific areas in Vinci or a new piece of technology that we think you are interested in and like to know more about. And the rest of the remainder of that hour we spend answering any questions that the users have, help you through any issues that you may have. So next week we have one of those, and next week's call will be hosted by Augie Toronto, our Vinci IT director. So I invite you to attend that call and bring any questions that you may have. So take advantage of that if you can. So with that, I'll stop and open it up to questions.
Fantastic. We do have a few pending questions here for the audience. Please take this opportunity, type those questions into the questions box and go to webinar. The first question we have here, for chart review services, what kind of people are on that team? Is it clinicians?
We do have a combination of data experts and people with clinical background, and also I believe the team is also able to tap into other resources if necessary. So if you want to speak with that group directly or ask questions of that group about the type of service that you may need, feel free to send an email to vinci@va.gov and specify that you're looking for that type of service or that type of help, and that team or a member of that team will contact you.
Great, thank you. The next question here, is there any chance Vinci can retain STFS? If not, is there an alternative software you would recommend?
Yeah, and at this point, I guess our recommendation is if you can at all, if it's at all possible, move to Sas. That's the basically the most popular analytical tool in Vinci. At the same time, keep in mind that, as I mentioned, SPSS will still be supported as long as Vinci is allowed to continue basically keeping and using the same old copy of SPSS. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. If you need help transitioning to another one of the tools, contact us and we'll provide you the staff time and help to help you get started through that process.
Great, thank you. The next question here, how do we access the Linux workspace?
Okay, so the Linux workspace is if you're using it, for example, a Sas Grid environment, you're already using the Linux environment that Sas Grid runs on Linux. But if you have a special need for Linux, usually it's in the form of requesting a development workspace, and at that point you're giving you'd be assigned a Linux VM for your dedicated use. So send a request to vinci@va.gov, and we can help you with that.
Great, thank you. The next question, is Atlas TI available on Vinci? Or what program should we use to analyze TIU notes data?
I'll have to check on Atlas. We do have a library of other software applications that you can install if you do have access to a development workspace. I'm not sure about Atlas, but in terms of working with TIU nodes, we do have the data stored in a SQL Server database. We have the data indexed using the full text indexing in SQL Server, so you're able to use the full text index search in SQL Server to basically search for terms and so forth in the TIU nodes. In the near future, we're working on having a couple of new offerings, some custom applications perhaps to help you search through the nodes easier. And again, as I mentioned before, we do have the NLP team in Vinci that's ready to help you with any custom NLP work or work that you want to do with the TIU nodes. So those are some of the tools available right now.
Great, thank you. The next question here: do we need IRB permission to specifically request for OMOP data, or do we just need IRB permission to request for data on Vinci?
So I guess the IRB basically specifies the type of data you need, the extent of data that you need, and then you go through the DART process for a research project to request the data. So OMOP data is now one of the options that you can select when you go through the DART process. So if you want to access OMOP data, you can request it when you do request the different data sources in your DART application. Keeping in mind that OMOP is basically a derived data set from the CDW and some of the other data sets. So even though it uses a different data model and it's a more summarized, abbreviated data set, it is still basically basically a derived data set from the rest of the data set. So there's nothing in OMOP that's not already in data sets in other data sets. So, but if you have a need for it, you request it through the DART process.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question here: how do we obtain data dictionaries for a given domain?
So CDW team offers a set of documents to help you with the data dictionaries, or basically a set of diagrams as well. ER diagrams that you can use to get more familiar with the different data sets and the different columns and the different tables. Both through Vinci and also hopefully in the near future with the OMOP Odyssey tools, we'll be offering basically easy to use online applications that you can use to search through basically metadata and sort of get familiar with the data sets, the structure of the data, the makeup of all the different data sets in Vinci.
Okay, great, thank you. We're just at the top of the hour here, but I'm going to try to take one last question in here. Will you ever put back the analytic procedures onto the desktop Sas? They were on the old workspace, but are no longer there without going to another server.
That would be a good question for our Sas team. Whoever asked that question, please send us an email to vincifva.gov, and we'll direct that to our Sas team and see if there's a way to provide you the access that you need to those procedures. I'm sure it can be done, so please go ahead and send that email request, and we'll get you set up with that access.
Great, thank you. We do have a few pending questions out here. For those of you that we didn't get to your questions, as we said earlier, please just send those into vinci@va.gov, and we will get answers out to you. I apologize, we do have a limited amount of time for these sessions, but we try to get to as much as we can. Hamid, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to jump in for Tim and prepare and present for today's session. We really do appreciate you helping out today. For the audience, I'm going to close the session out in just a minute, and when I do, you will be prompted with a feedback form. Please take a few moments to fill that out. We really do read through and try to implement as much feedback as we can. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's HSR&D Cyber Seminar, and we look forward to seeing you at a future session. Thank you.